Okay, very comprehensive update. Thanks so much, Chris. So we're going to move on to our next update. And as we all know, a lot of rights-of-way either cross directly over agricultural lands or run adjacent to agricultural lands. And so we've asked Leslie Holloway, who is Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs at Missouri Farm Bureau, to speak and provide an agricultural update. Leslie has managed regulatory issues in state and local government affairs since 1995. She's held a variety of policy and administrative positions for Missouri's Director of Agriculture and as congressional staff in Washington, D.C. So welcome, Leslie.
Good morning. First of all, we want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to have some time on your program. The main spokesperson for the farm bureaus in the various states that are working together to try to figure out how best to address the need for additional pollinator and monarch habitat is Lindsay Ramsey, who is with the Illinois Farm Bureau, and I've talked a little with one of the Illinois Department of Transportation representatives here, and I know that they are working very closely together. And if you all are not working with your state farm bureaus, the first thing I would encourage you to do is to talk with them. I know many of you already do. Many of you work with landowners on a daily basis, so that it's not a foreign concept, I'm sure. But what we wanted to do here today was really just emphasize our interest in being a part of your discussions, because as you know, what happens on rights of way can ultimately have an impact on what happens on adjoining private property as well. And farmers and other landowners are very interested not only in working in partnership with you, as some of the previous speakers have pointed out today, but also very interested in promoting the improvement of habitat. As you know, this particular species is an easy one to generate interest in and enthusiasm for. So everyone wants to do something. It's just a matter of figuring out how much everyone can do and how quickly we need to do it, I guess. But for those of you who are not familiar with Farm Bureau, wanted to at least explain that Farm Bureau is a national organization representing a combined total of about what we call member families, 6 million member families total nationwide. Each state farm bureau represents a fraction of that total, and each of the state farm bureaus is a little different in their size and their methods of operation, but we do try to coordinate through the American Farm Bureau. Our efforts through Lindsay Ramsey with the Illinois Farm Bureau are really just getting off the ground, and so she could not be here today, unfortunately, and asked that I be here to at least speak for the farm bureaus that are already working together. And tomorrow, a consultant who we are working with will be here for your discussions in the morning. His name is Jim Lynch, and he is helping us try to pull together the various efforts that are going on both in Washington, D.C. with the Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as what the individual states might be doing. We are a farmer-led organization, so the actions that we take are driven by the positions, policy positions, and direction that our farmer members give us. So we take very seriously their interest in anything that they feel is important. We have been involved with the Endangered Species Act in a variety of ways for a number of years, but of course largely starting in the western part of the United States, there have been probably more, there is more experience dealing with endangered species, but pollinators affects obviously a broader range in the country, and so we are looking to try to get more involved in the process, learning how the CCAA process works, and knowing that you all are starting to look at developing a CCAA. Our main message is that we would like to be included in those discussions. We think that the management practices on both right-of-way that is owned or held in easement can and should be compatible and consistent with adjoining landowners' practices. We have concerns with not only property rights, with access to property and the use of the land that's in the right-of-way, but also with the management in the use of pesticides or other chemicals, and mowing schedules. Those things can impact the adjoining property, which you all know. And like you, we're learning what that means for pollinator habitat. Mr. Edelman talked about the fact that science is very important to this whole process, and we couldn't agree more. There are new things that we are learning throughout the development of a strategy in one way or another, and it's still a relatively new science for agriculture as well as for other interested parties. I'll speak specifically about Missouri just as an example. When we started promoting pollinator habitat a couple of years ago, the native seed mixes that were available, some were found to have some weeds that really were causing problems for some of the farmers who were using those seed mixes in plantings. And so that's just an example of a challenge that we think will need to be addressed pretty comprehensively if a national strategy is put together. In Missouri, the Missourians for Monarchs Collaborative was formed in July of 2016. Missouri Farm Bureau does not serve as a formal member of that collaborative. We are participating to the extent that there are materials that we disseminate and also events that we participate in. At some point, it may be that we do become a formal member of the collaborative. But as an example of the partnerships and the collaboration involving agriculture, the Missourians for Monarchs Collaborative does include members representing our University of Missouri College of Agriculture and the associations of the soybean and corn growers. Monsanto is also a part of that collaborative. The print materials that have been put together have been sponsored by a variety of members of that collaborative, and we have used those fairly extensively. It has been a little bit of a disjointed process, I guess I'll call it, trying to get something coordinated by a diverse range of interests is never easy, and you're already experiencing that in the process that you're going through. But we would also emphasize in trying to work with agriculture that the technicians that farmers and ranchers typically turn to are often involved with the Extension Service, for example, or with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, your NRCS, your Farm Service Agency, Rural Development, those types of entities. And so we would suggest that those types of entities really need to be involved in order to have the agricultural perspective represented clearly in any effort to try to develop management strategies on pollinator habitat. With Missouri Department of Transportation, I know we have a representative of MoDOT here, and I know that they have worked specifically with the Missourians for Monarchs Collaborative, and we're very anxious to see how the strategy develops as it relates to the Interstate 35 corridor through Missouri. We know that that's been targeted as one particular roadway that needs to be a centerpiece of a strategy in Missouri, and we are anxious to try to work together to see if there are ways that private landowners can be a part of that. There is technical assistance available through the Extension Service and the NRCS. In Missouri, I know our Missouri NRCS has set certain standards for habitat improvement for landowners, for private landowners who are involved in the farm programs. And I know that they have worked with MoDOT, and they're interested in working with any other public agencies that might have need for assistance with setting standards for that purpose. Under the Conservation Reserve Program, as of July of this year, the USDA reports that in their pollinator habitat practice, Iowa is leading with over 200,000 acres in that CP42 pollinator habitat practice. Illinois has 100,000, they're the second, and then Missouri is third at 40,000. So there is quite a bit of interest in those types of programs. Farmer interest is very high, and again, going back to the appeal of helping the monarch and helping other pollinators, that's something that we all can really, I think, build momentum from, because people do want to do something, and they just need some direction and understand how they can go about doing it. And that's really the extent of my remarks for today, and I'd be happy to try to address any questions. Thank you. Thanks, Iris.
We have time for a couple questions, so if you wouldn't mind, Leslie.
Not so much a question, but just a consideration. Have you all looked at the CRP land as adopting more of an integrated approach on how to manage? Because a lot of the farmers will mow that set aside around the crop fields, and then all the invasives and the trees keep coming back, and they're getting very frustrated with that. Where if they adopted an integrated approach with selective herbicides, we could allow the milkweed and all the other pollinator plants to actually be around the crop fields and actually add to their value of their crops by increasing yields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, anything that's going to add value to the crops and increase yields is always of interest. I haven't been involved in any specific discussions, but I know there is concern in Missouri, and I haven't talked to Stacy from MoDOT about this particular issue, but we do have some concerns with control of invasive species by the state Department of Transportation as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely some cross connection there where we might be able to find ways that we can address the concerns that are more pertinent to the state agencies as well as the concerns of the private landowner.
And for our efforts with the monarch, it's 24 million acres around the country, so it's not just an incidental thing.
Thanks.